A legendary Ball Trainmaster automatic has just landed on my bench. Take a look at how it presents itself. The case is quite worn, but honestly, that is not surprising. This watch was most likely produced in the 1970s. First, I will run a test on the time grapher. I can see that the case has been polished many times to a bright shine, although originally it should have had a matte finish. The edges have lost their sharpness, but all of this can still be saved. So, I invite you to watch how I dealt with it. Now I am releasing the dial foot clamps. A gentle lift should remove the dial. Unfortunately, it is resisting in a strange way. Well, would you look at that? There are no dial feet. Apparently, some hobbyist must have pushed a little too hard and broke them off. They will have to be recreated. Luckily, the marks where they used to be are still visible. The paint is chipped. To repair this properly, I would have to remove all the paint and print the dial again. But then, it would no longer be the original dial. I am really torn about what to do here. But in the end, I will leave the original dial as it is. Now I will remove the hour wheel. This is an interesting cannon pinion assembly together with the minute wheel, I think, but I am not completely sure. Maybe someone can help me identify it correctly. I have mounted the movement in the holder, and now I am starting to dismantle the automatic winding assembly. First the rotor, and then the rest. I am checking for excessive play, but I can see that the bearing is in good condition. Now, 2 retaining screws. Before I remove the barrel bridge, I have to let down the mainspring power. I have a habit of putting screws back into their original places. That way I do not have to remember where each one came from. Now it is time to remove the balance bridge. I am unscrewing the screw that holds the ratchet wheel and then the crown wheel. Now the click spring and the click. I have noticed that one screw is missing from the barrel bridge. Unfortunately, I do not have a replacement screw like this. For now, I will install the two remaining barrel bridge screws. Now I will remove the balance hacking lever. This is a very useful feature if you want to set the watch precisely. Now I will turn the movement over to dismantle the keyless works. First, I remove the hour wheel. And now the minute wheel together with the cannon pinion. This is a combined tandem of two gears. Now it is time for the intermediate wheel. I need to check whether it can work on both sides. Sometimes this kind of wheel can only be installed in one position because the teeth are undercut. But in this case, I can see that it can be installed in either position. Now I can unscrew the remaining parts of the keyless works. First, the setting lever spring. Next, I remove the yoke spring. And then the yoke itself. Now I remove the setting lever. Next, I remove the winding stem and the remaining components, the winding pinion and the sliding clutch. Since all the components on the dial side have now been removed, I move to the other side to take out the train wheels. This is a good moment to check whether the pallet stones are properly seated and whether there is any looseness. Once I have checked that, I unscrew the pallet fork bridge to remove the pallet fork. I can see excessive play in the upper jewel. The time grapher reading showed some knocking sounds, and maybe they were coming from this jewel. Disassembly is complete. Now I will install the balance again, so I can safely clean it together with the main plate. This is exactly why patience matters.
If I had tightened the screw all the way, the balance staff would probably have broken. Now I can see that the balance staff did not sit correctly in its lower jewel. It takes a little bit of work, but now it is sitting properly. The screw can be tightened. For cleaning, I will remove the upper and lower shock protection assemblies. The hole jewel and the cap jewel will be cleaned separately. The complete set of balance jewels is now at the bottom of the cleaning basket. Time to prepare the rest of the parts for cleaning. All the parts are in the baskets, so now I will open the mainspring barrel and take out the mainspring. I want to check its condition, although I have a feeling it was replaced quite recently. It is worth using a piece of plastic film for protection, so the barrel cover does not shoot off into space. It is not tiny, but still, why search for it on the floor and hurt your back? Important, I must not forget to remove the mainspring arbor. Now it is clearly visible that this is a newly installed mainspring. I will not replace it. The automatic winding mechanism still has to be dismantled. It consists of 4 gears covered by a plate. It looks freshly cleaned and lubricated, but I am not completely sure, so I have to clean and lubricate everything myself. Now everything goes into the Elma cleaning machine. The cleaning is finished, and now I can start assembly. First, I install the reversing wheel, then the intermediate wheel of the automatic winding train, then the oscillating weight wheel. This wheel had excessive play on its arbor. I slightly reduced the diameter of the hole using a staking tool, but that part was done off camera. It is a good idea to apply a tiny amount of Mobius 9010 synthetic oil to each jewel. Now it is time to deal with the mainspring. A small amount of braking grease goes onto the sidewalls of the mainspring barrel. And now, I wind the mainspring into a cheap Chinese tool. Honestly, I can recommend it with a clear conscience. If someone likes branded tools, that is absolutely fine. But for now, I cannot afford them. I am only a hobbyist. Here I have to be careful. It is very easy to damage the mainspring at this point. Fortunately, everything is going smoothly. Another important moment is removing the winding arbor without pulling the mainspring out of its seat. This time, it worked. A tiny amount of oil on the coils. Everyone does it, so I do it too. Now it is time to install the mainspring arbor. I have to make sure the arbor is positioned correctly. The hook on the arbor must engage with the slot in the mainspring, so the movement can wind the spring. I can see that it has seated properly. Now I can install the barrel cover. Done. A small amount of oil goes where metal works against metal. And a small amount of oil where the barrel arbor meets the barrel bearing.
First goes wheel number 2, and then the mainspring barrel. Now I will install the pallet fork and the pallet fork bridge. The pallet fork is very delicate, so I have to be careful not to damage the pivots. I have had problems with broken pallet fork pivots many times before. I can see that it has seated correctly in its place, so now I can tighten the screws. Next, I place the escape wheel and the remaining wheels of the going train. Now I install the train bridge. I have to make sure that all the pivots enter their jewel holes correctly. I also have to remember that the pallet fork is already in place, so the work is a little more difficult. But I can manage it because I have a good microscope. I can lightly start the screws, but not tighten them fully yet. First, I need to inspect all the pivots and make sure they are seated in their jewels. All the pivots are visible in their jewel holes. Now the screws can be safely tightened. Now it is time to install the barrel bridge. A little oil goes into the jewel holes of the train wheels. And the pallet fork. Now I turn the movement over to the dial side and repeat the same lubrication process. It is time to install the keyless works. A small amount of oil goes where metal touches metal. I install the intermediate winding wheel. The winding stem has been lubricated. Now I insert the winding pinion and the sliding clutch. Next comes the setting lever. A tiny amount of grease goes onto the yoke post. I install the yoke and the yoke spring. You have to be careful here because this spring loves to fly away. Now it is time for the setting lever spring. A little grease goes onto the metal-to-metal contact points. The spring has snapped into place. Now it is time to check how the whole keyless works assembly operates and whether it switches properly between winding and hand setting. Now a small amount of grease goes onto the hour wheel. And right after that, I install the hour wheel and the minute wheel together with the cover.
I turn the movement back to the watchmaker's side. I just remembered that I did not install the balance hacking lever. I have to remove the barrel bridge because the spring must sit underneath the bridge. Now it is time to install the ratchet wheel, together with the click and the click spring. Now I install the ratchet wheel with its left-hand thread screw and then the crown wheel with its retaining screw. Now I can give the mainspring just a little initial wind. Only a few turns. Now I check whether the mainspring is transferring energy to the pallet fork. The pallet fork should jump lightly between the banking pins, and it does. Now it is time to lubricate the pallet stones. This is a difficult moment and it requires attention. If someone's hands are shaking too much, this is almost impossible to do. I lubricate in 3 cycles, 5 teeth each time. You can see my hands shaking, but I am still managing. The last lubrication job will be oiling the balance jewels. Many people use automatic oilers for this, but I really enjoy the challenge. I repeat the process many times because sometimes the oiled jewel sticks to the tweezers or to the oiler. Then I have to wash everything and start again. It definitely trains my tolerance. A tiny drop of Mobius 9010 goes onto the cap jewel. Then I cover it with the whole jewel. This time, it worked on the first try. And again, success. Now I install the jewel on the dial side. I turn the movement over to the watchmaker's side to install the balance, and then I will place the jewel into it. The balance is installed. The movement has started, and that is definitely something to be happy about. Excellent. Now it is time for the first test on the time grapher. Of course, there will be more regulation later. But at this point, I just want to see where I am. It looks very promising. But I need to wait at least 24 hours before I start any further regulation. For now, this vintage Ball Trainmaster is alive again. Now it is time to deal with the dial feet. I bought a dial feet repair kit. First, I need to reduce the thickness of the dial foot slightly, so it fits properly against the surface. Then I want to remove about half of the base material with a file. That part would otherwise get in the way and prevent the foot from sitting perpendicular to the dial. So, Let's get started. The base of the dial foot is now thin enough. Now I will use a needle file to grind it down halfway. This should prevent any collision between the base of the foot and the curved surface of the dial. I have to be careful with the pressure. This is a very small part and it can break easily. Done. I will not film the same process on the second dial foot. The dial feet are now prepared, so we can move on to removing the old glue residue from the dial. It comes off quite easily. That is a nice surprise. Now I gently rub the area with P800 sandpaper, exactly where the old dial foot marks are still visible. Now it is time to prepare the adhesive. This is a two-part epoxy resin, so both components have to be mixed thoroughly. Oh, I can definitely feel that something is happening because there is a strange smell now. Earlier, I prepared a piece of PVC film. This is to avoid accidentally getting resin on the movement, and also to make separation easier later. Once the epoxy has cured, I should be able to separate the dial, together with the new feet, from the movement quite easily. Now you can clearly see why I had to file away half of the dial foot base. I am clamping the foot gently, just to stabilize it a little. Now I can apply the epoxy. This is exactly what I expected. The protective film has saved me from a lot of trouble. I cannot imagine having to disassemble a finished, clean movement just to remove epoxy from it. Now I place the dial onto the movement. I still have time to align it correctly because the epoxy cures slowly. One final look. It looks centered. The job is done. I will come back tomorrow to check whether the dial feet have bonded properly. A night has passed. Now I can take a look at the dial and check whether the new dial feet are holding strongly enough. I can loosen the dial retaining levers and remove the dial. Now it is time to remove the film that I used to protect the movement from the epoxy. There are a few tiny resin particles left, and they have to be removed. I can see that there is not enough epoxy under the dial feet, so now I will fill in the missing areas to make the feet more stable. In the meantime, I can work on the case back. The entire case has been polished to a bright shine. It has lost all of its sharp edges, and now they are rounded. I will do my best to improve this, but I cannot work too aggressively. Every bit of sanding removes material. There are clear pits visible on the caseback, but I do not think I can remove them completely without reducing the readability of the engraving. So I will use the golden rule and take the middle path. I will remove some of the damage and leave some of it. I have 800 grit sandpaper on my bench. A few more strokes. The pits are still visible. I keep going. A little better now, but the pits are still there. My goal is to restore the matte finish, not to remove every single pit. I will stop here because I do not want to reduce the readability of the markings. I will work on the outer rim of the caseback off camera because it will be difficult for me to film it properly. I got so carried away with the work that I completely forgot to film the case repair. I had never done this kind of repair before, and I do not have a super precise lapping machine. The whole sanding and refinishing process is really a topic for a separate video. Everything I know about how to do it comes only from videos shared by other YouTubers. I did the sanding on my budget bench grinder. I had to make some small modifications to the tool rest, but in the end, everything worked out. You will be able to see the final result near the end of this video. There is still a little bit of work left to do on the movement. I need to install the automatic winding mechanism. It is important to make sure that the automatic winding mechanism meshes correctly with the mainspring barrel gear. Yes, exactly like this. One last check to make sure that all the gears are working together properly. The final step is to screw on the rotor, which drives the whole automatic winding system. Beautiful. Everything works exactly as it should. I am turning the movement over to install the hour wheel. The dial washer is flattened. I will add one more round washer to prevent the hour wheel from lifting. Now it is time to test fit the dial. I have a problem with it because of the missing paint. I really need to remove the rust and paint over the exposed metal. This way, I can stop the dial from degrading any further, because I want this watch to keep working for many more years. I will take the movement out of the holder and place it on a cushion. Now I have to be careful, because the glued dial feet can be damaged very easily. I can now tighten the dial foot clamps. The second dial foot is giving me a bit more trouble, but I managed to do it. Now it is time for a test fit with the hands. At this point, you can clearly see how terrible the edge of the dial looks. The hour hand has some missing paint in the center section. I need to fix it, but I do not have the right paint at the moment. So, I will have to buy some paint for the hands and the dial. I will buy a popular model enamel paint. I sometimes use it to color engravings on movement bridges, and it works really well. I am a little worried that the dial is sitting too high. That is because the attached dial feet take up a little bit of space and do not allow the dial to sit deeper. Yes, this is wrong. The hand is resting against the dial. It cannot be like this. The hand must sit just above the dial. It must not touch it. Now I can clearly see that the glue around the dial foot is preventing the dial from sitting deeper. So, disassembly and correction. I need to remove some of the glue so the dial can sit lower. I have to be very careful because if the screwdriver slips, it can damage the dial. This is like working in a minefield. Another test fit. It turns out that the dial feet are now too long. They are interfering with the free movement of the rotor. They need to be shortened. Oh no! For a moment, I thought the dial foot had come off. Fortunately, nothing like that happened. Now the second dial foot. The procedure is finished and the dial is back in place again. Now I will test fit the hour hand. It looks like it is good now. Unfortunately, during all these adjustments, I scratched off even more paint. It looks terrible, so the hand definitely needs to be repainted. Next comes the minute hand. It also has a small paint chip near the base. That will also need to be repainted. The seconds hand goes on last. This movement has a hacking function. That is very convenient when installing the hands. I push the crown in and the movement starts running. They do not call it the Trainmaster for nothing. I really like this function. I will finish today's repair at this point. I cannot wait for the paint to arrive. At the moment, this video is already over an hour long and there is still so much left to show. I definitely need to film the dial painting process. I am very sorry that I was not able to record the stage of painting the dial or the minute and hour hands. Well, what can I say? Memory is a very fragile thing. I can only show you the final result. You can see that the white color of the dial paint is slightly different. I decided to leave it as it is now. My goal was to protect the dial from further deterioration. You can still see the black hairline where the paint has cracked. I was afraid to correct it because it would be very easy to make the current condition worse. However, I do have some footage of painting the seconds hand. I did the painting with a toothpick because I did not have a brush small enough for this job. So, to sum it up, it turned out quite well. While the freshly painted parts were drying, I was able to take care of the final regulation of the movement. The result is quite decent. I can honestly be proud of it. (260 degrees of amplitude and a beat error of 0.2 milliseconds in the dial-down position is quite a decent result for a movement that is around 50 years old. Now I am moving to the dial-up position. And the result is not any worse. It is really pleasant to look at. At 28,800 beats per hour, the seconds hand seems almost to glide. The next position is crown up. The amplitude has to drop, but the remaining results are still very satisfying. Now crown to the side. This is usually the position that movements like the least, but here, surprisingly, it is not worse at all. In fact, it is even slightly better. And finally, crown down. The results are very satisfying. I hope you share my enthusiasm. Please let me know in the comments. Now all I have to do is wait for the painted parts to dry, and then I can begin the final assembly. I have checked all the parts. They are dry, so I can begin installing the dial and the hands. Now I will open the locking clamp so the dial foot can go in as deep as possible. On the other side, the clamp is already open. I need to press the clamp down. The dial foot is now secured, and the same with the second dial foot. Now you can see that the left edge of the dial has a slightly different shade of white. Somehow, it does not really bother me. The paint will yellow a little with time. I am installing the hour hand. I am a little worried that I might damage the freshly painted layer of paint. I prepared a special piece of silicone-coated paper, the backing paper from a sticker. I hope it will help me protect the fresh paint. So far, everything is going well. The paint is not damaged. The hour hand is seated. Now it is time for the minute hand. A light initial press. It is a little too high, so I need to press it down a bit more. There we go. It worked. Last in line is the seconds hand. Now it is time to place the movement back into the case. I am installing the movement spacer ring and the retaining screws. Finally, the dust cover and the case back.
The last step will be fitting the strap. I bought this watch with a new strap. It looks very decent, so I am not going to change it. Done. Now I am looking at the final result of my work. This was not a simple movement service. I wanted to restore a decent appearance, remove the scratches, and bring back the sharpness of the edges. I spent many hours on this watch, but the pleasure was all mine. If anyone would like to become the owner of this watch, please contact me through my website. I will pin the link in the description. I value my work at $500. The purchase price from the eBay auction was $506. I fitted a new crystal and a new caseback gasket. I did not replace the mainspring because there was no need to do so. Thank you very much to everyone who stayed with me until the end.